day 2 of reading It, but we are on bottom of page 174, because I read in between. 2 weeks ago, a boy Ben knew only vaguely, he was in the other 5th grade classroom at Derry Elementary, had looked into one of the storm drains out by Neobold Street and had seen what looked like a lot of hair floating around there. This boy, whose name was either Frankie or Freddie Ross, or maybe Roth, had been out prospecting for goodies with a gadget of his own invention, which he called the Fabulous Gum Stick. When he talked about it, you could tell he thought about it like that, in capital letters and maybe neon as well. The Fabulous Gum Stick was a birch branch with a big wad of bubble gum stuck to the tip. In his spare time, Freddie, or Frankie, walked around Derry with it, peering into sewers and drains. Sometimes he saw money, pennies mostly, but sometimes a dime or even a quarter. He referred to these latter, for some reason known only to him, as Quay monsters. Once the money was spotted, Frankie, or Freddie, and the Fabulous Gum Stick would swing into action. One downward poke through the grating, and the coin was as good as in his pocket. Ben had heard rumors of Frankie or Freddie and his gum stick long before the kid had vaulted into the limelight by discovering the body of Veronica Grogan. "He's really gross," a kid named Richie Tozer had confided to Ben one day during activity period. Whatever the fuck that means. I guess free period, but that's bonkers. Tozer was a scrawny kid who wore glasses. Ben thought that without them, Tozer probably saw every bit as well as Mr. Magoo. His magnified eyes swam behind the thick lenses with an expression of perpetual surprise. He also had huge front teeth that had earned him the name Bucky Beaver. He was in the same 5th grade class as Freddie or Frankie. Pokes that gum stick of his down sewer drains all day long and then chews the gum from it at the end of the night. "Oh gosh, that's bad," Ben had exclaimed. "That's white, Wabbit," Tozer said and walked away. Frankie or Freddie had worked the Fabulous Gum Stick back and forth through the grate of the storm drain, believing he found a wig. He thought maybe he could dry it out and give it to his mother for her birthday or something. After a few minutes of poking and prodding, just as he was about to give up, a face had floated out of the murky water in the plugged drain, a face with dead leaves plastered to its white cheeks and dirt in its staring eyes. Frankie or Freddie ran home screaming. Veronica Grogan had been in the 4th grade at the Neobold Street Church School, which was run by people Ben's mother called the Chrysters. She was buried on what would have been her 10th birthday. After this is not a good day for me. After this most recent horror, Arlene Hanscom had taken Ben into the living room one evening and set him down on the couch. She picked up his hands and looked intently into his face. Ben looked back, feeling a little uneasy. "Ben," she said presently, "are you a fool?" "No, Mama," Ben said, feeling more uneasy than ever. He hadn't the slightest idea of what this was about. He could not remember ever seeing his Mama look so grave. "No," she echoed, "I don't believe you are." She fell silent for a long time, then not looking at Ben, but pensively out the window. Ben wondered briefly if she had forgotten all about him. She was a young woman still, only 32, but raising a boy herself had put a mark on her. She worked 40 hours a week in the spool and bale room at Stark's Mills in Newport, and after work days when the dust and lint had been particularly bad, she sometimes coughed so long and hard that Ben would become frightened. On those nights he would lie awake for a long time, looking through the window beside his bed into the darkness, wondering what would become of him if she died. He would be an orphan then, he supposed. He might become a state kid. He thought that meant you had to go live with farmers who made you work from sunup to sunset. Or he might be sent to Bangor Orphan Asylum. He tried to tell himself it was foolish to worry about such things, but the telling did absolutely no good. Nor was it just himself he was worried about. He worried for her as well. She was a hard woman, his Mama, and she insisted on having her own way about most things, but she was a good Mama. He loved her very much. You know about these murders, she said, looking back at last. He nodded. At first people thought they were... She hesitated over the next word. Never spoken in her son's presence before, but the circumstances were unusual, and she forced herself. Sex crimes. Maybe they were, and maybe they weren't. Maybe they're over, and maybe they're not. No one can be sure of anything anymore, except that some crazy man who preys on little children is out there. Do you understand me, Ben? He nodded. And you know what I mean when I say they may have been sex crimes. He didn't, at least not exactly, but he nodded again. If his mother felt she had to talk to him about the birds and the bees as well as all this other business, he thought he would die of embarrassment. I worry about you, Ben. I worry that I'm not doing right by you. Ben squirmed and said nothing. You're on your own a lot, too much. I guess you, Mama, hush while I'm talking to you, she said, and Ben hushed. You have to be careful, Benny. Summer's coming, and I don't want to spoil your vacation, but you have to be careful. I want you in by supper time every day. What time do we eat supper? 6 o'clock. Right with Eversharp. So hear what I'm saying. If I set the table and pour your milk, see there's no Ben washing his hands at the sink, I'm going to go right away to the telephone and call the police and report you missing. Do you understand that? Yes, Mama. And you believe I mean exactly what I say? Yes. It would probably turn out that I did it for nothing if I ever had to do it at all. I'm not entirely ignorant about the ways of boys. I know they get wrapped up in their own games and projects during summer vacation, lining bees back to their hives, or playing ball, or kick the can, or whatever. I have a pretty good idea what you and your friends are up to, you see. Ben nodded soberly, thinking that if she didn't know he had no friends, she probably didn't know anywhere near as much about boyhood as she thought she did. But he never would have dreamed of saying such a thing to her, not in 10,000 years of dreaming. She took something from the pocket of her house dress and handed it to him. It was a small plastic box. Ben opened it. When he saw what was inside, his mouth dropped open. Wow, he said, his admiration totally unaffected. Thanks. It was a Timex watch with small silver numbers and an imitation leather band. She had set it and wound it. He could hear it ticking. Geez, it's the coolest. He gave her an enthusiastic hug and a loud kiss on the cheek. She smiled, pleased that he was pleased, and nodded. Then she grew grave. Put it on, keep it on, wear it, wind it, mind it, don't lose it. Okay, now that you have a watch, you have no reason to be late home. Remember what I said. If you're not home on time, the police will be looking for you on my behalf, at least until they catch the bastard who's killing children around here. Don't you dare be a single minute late, or I'll be on that telephone. Yes, Mama. One other thing. Don't want you going around alone. You know enough not to accept candy or rides from strangers. We both agree that you're no fool, and you're big for your age. But a grown man, particularly a crazy one, can overpower a child if he really wants to. When you go to the park or the library, go with one of your friends. I will, Mama. She looked out the window again and uttered a sigh that was full of trouble. Things have come to a pretty pass when a thing like this can go on. Things have come to a pretty pass when a thing like this can go on. Stephen King, never mind. There's something ugly about this town anyways. I've always thought so. She nodded back at him, brows drawn down. You're such a wanderer, Ben. You must know almost every place in Derry, don't you? The town part of it, at least. Ben didn't think he knew anywhere near all the places, but he did know a lot of them. And he was so thrilled by the unexpected gift of the Timex that he would have agreed with his mother that night if she suggested John Wayne should play Adolf Hitler in a musical comedy about World War II. He nodded. I think there is a musical comedy about war. Isn't that the plot of The Producers? Not the John Wayne bit. I've never seen The Producers. Sorry, I was thinking about The Producers. You've never seen anything, have you? She asked. Anything or anyone, suspicious? Anything out of the ordinary? Anything that scared you? And in his pleasure of the watch, his feeling of love for her, his small boy gladness over her concern, which was at the same time a little frightened in its unhidden, abashed fierceness. He almost told her about the thing that happened last January. He opened his mouth and then some powerful intuition, closed it again. What was that something exactly? Intuition. No more than that, and no less. Even children may intuit love's more complex responsibilities from time to time, and to sense that in some cases it may be kinder to remain quiet. That was the part of the reason Ben closed his mouth, but there was something else as well, something not so noble. She could be hard as Mama. She could be a boss. She never called him fat. She called him big, sometimes amplified to big for his age. And when there were leftovers from supper, she would often bring them to him while he was watching TV or doing homework, and he would eat them, although some dim part of him hated himself for doing so. But never his Mama for putting the food before him. Ben Hanscom would not have dared to hate his Mama. God would surely strike him dead for feeling such a bruteness, ungrateful emotion even for a second. And perhaps some even dimmer part of him, the far-off Tibet of Ben's deeper thoughts, suspected her motives for this constant feeding. Was it love? Was it just love? Could it be anything else? Surely not. But he wondered. More to the point, she didn't know he had no friends. Oh, I'm at 11 minutes, and I'm not feeling it today. So, we are done. Well, I'm going to keep reading, but not out loud.